Livestream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and I'm here with my co host, Anthony Marchetta. Anthony, how are you doing today?
Eh.
Mm. You know what? I feel it too. Uh, I am under disasters recently, and it's, eh, you know what? I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with this humdrum life. I don't want to deal with these unheroic melancholies of the soul. I'd rather focus on the greatest early medieval tragedy of England, King Arthur and his passing, but rather his legends. His passing is merely the end of the tale, a sort of stepping into reality, which Mallory uh, captured very well, even though I have my thoughts about him. Um, I have thoughts, Anthony. Many thoughts.
Oh boy.
But the question I've been turning over my head when I haven't been thinking about more real life things in a pressing nature is what is essential King Arthur? Like, we all know the stories, but one of the things that definitely bothers me in the sense of what the adaptions seem to focus on has always felt a little anemic for me, especially the written ones. The movies are just the movies. You know, they have to focus on what they do.
There's
Watch.
been exactly one good Arthur movie, and it's Excalibur.
That's right. That's right. Uh, and it focuses on. Anyway, but point is that I feel like there's a strong loss of adaptation between the many different Arthur books and novels, and I don't know. I want to talk about it.
Yeah, so I mentioned this on the stream a while ago, but I was reading and didn't finish a admittedly quite well written book called Lancelot. It was like considered one of, the quote unquote great modern King Arthur adaptations. It got very good reviews. It even seemed to be well liked by readers, right? And I will say this, it was indeed well written. Um, Lancelot comes through as a very vivid character, right? The characters in it come through very well. But there was something about it that felt off. It felt weird, right? Like there was just a pervasive
Right.
wrongness that was as I was reading it that made me like very nearly drop it a couple times before going back and then finally dropping it before I finished the book at what should in theory have been a very exciting point, but I got tired of that Merlin was apparently a Reddit atheist. Uh, I mean, he wasn't a Reddit atheist because they weren't atheists, but like, you know what I mean, the attitude. Uh, like, okay, so here's the thing about the King Arthur legends. The King Arthur legends are the central story in some ways of like Western civilization. It's the matter of Britain. So every great civilization has a sort of matter of stories around it, right? The Greek civilizations have the Iliad and the Odyssey. Uh, that's their central stories. Rome literally wrote one because they wanted one, and they got the Aeneid out of it. Uh, so there you go. Medieval
My
Europe.
man, Virgil.
Yep, my man Virgil. Uh, medieval Europe. I'm trying. I want to say Divine Comedy. Actually, that would be Renaissance era. That wouldn't be medieval, would it? So I can't say the Divine Comedy. Although I will say this though. Even though the Divine Comedy is Renaissance, in some ways its worldview is very medieval. Uh, not that
Divine Comedy?
I'm gonna. I know what you're going to say, and I'm gonna go. I will not. I dare not say that the Divine Comedy is not firmly placed in the Renaissance. Dante makes this very clear. Uh,
It was
so
written in 1320. Well, 1308 and 1320.
I guess high medieval then. For some reason, I had it in my head. He does the time period of the Divine Comedy, though, is like very, very. It's very clear in the book if you read it.
No, no,
High
I
medieval
dig it.
then, a little bit before the Renaissance.
Well, and it's like people think
So
the
there you go.
Renaissance.
That gives it to you. Which, by the way, this actually
Mm,
slots nicely into my theory here. Which, since the Divine Comedy is arguably the single greatest work of all of these, and it was created in what I would consider to be the single greatest civilization of the ones that we're mentioning. Make of
yeah.
that what you will.
Which if we have time, if we run out of things to say on King Arthur, man, there've been some bad pagan takes this week. Man.
Yeah,
Oh,
worth talking about later.
yeah.
But
But anyway, keep going. Keep going.
yeah, so you get the medieval era gives us the Divine Comedy. The Renaissance gives us Shakespeare, of course. Who might not have any single work that's as good as the Divine Comedy, but whose collective body of work is arguably greater than anybody else ever. Uh, and then, as John C. Wright pointed out correctly on Twitter and on his blog in comments, so unfortunately I can't link you to a post because I didn't save the Twitter thread, and he didn't make it a post on his blog, which he should have. But it was a good bit of writing. But they kind of seem to stop making great works by the end of the Victorian era, with very few exceptions. We got before that Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, right? War and Peace, Crime and Punishment, the brothers Karamazov. Yeah. Uh, China even gets its own founding work. If you go back to the Babylonian civilization, of course, you get the Epic of Gilgamesh. So even Japan gives us the first modern realistic novel, The Tale of Genji. At least on a timelines perspective. It's sort of the first novel in the same way that the Vikings discovered America. Like, yeah, it came first, but didn't affect anything else later. So it doesn't really matter much that it was first, except like from a trivia perspective, you know.
I mean,
But
we know
nevertheless,
that
it was
Reddit
first.
atheists love their trivia.
Yes, this is true. Uh, So, when you go into the matter of Britain and the King Arthur legends, what's interesting is that as there aren't any really capital G great works associated with it. I guess people might point to Tennyson. Idols of the King I guess sort of has a shot of being in that category. I don't know. I wouldn't put it there, to be honest with you. Not that
I
there's anything wrong with it, but I don't think it qualifies.
I haven't read it.
I've skimmed through it. I think I might have finished it. I can't
Well,
recall. It's been a while.
I mean,
I
I've
read
read
through
some
it quickly and it didn't
stanzas.
captivate me.
Yeah, I've read some stanzas, but like I don't really remember it at all. Uh,
The
hmm,
Once and Future King is excellent and highly recommended. We've talked about it on the show before.
mhm,
However, it is too dated, I think, to be considered one of the great works, right?
mm.
It's
I mean,
dated to its time, very much so. Um,
yeah. And by
so
the way, we hold on. Sorry, we don't mean dated in the sense of it's not worth reading, but it's in the sense of it's like he said, it's a product of its times. Like it has values that are specific to its time. It considers certain things adventurous to its time. And then it does things like, for example, skipping over the murder of Morgause and Lamorak and the whole Orkney drama around that with maybe 3 lines, maybe a paragraph.
yeah,
This is
it's
well, I'm going to let Anthony continue, but this is one of the things I want to rant about.
Yeah, that's true. And like the Divine Comedy, for example, like we were saying, it's also very dated to its time. The thing about the Divine Comedy, though, is that it's such a supreme work of genius, like that. Frankly, there is probably maybe one person in all of history who could have written the Divine Comedy. Right? Is Dante in that time with that education, with his ability, right? Like it is simply impossible to replicate by anyone. And that's kind of a category of all the great works, right? Um, But yeah, it kind of overcomes the fact that it dates itself by simply being too good. Uh, it's just so good. It has something to say anyway, even if you don't get any of the references.
Why is this Pope in hell? I thought the popes didn't go to hell. And then you read a little history, and it's like, oh.
Oh, the medievals did not have that delusion. Let me tell you, uh, they were very aware that popes went to hell. They were quite sure of it. But anyway, uh, that's another story. So, going to the matter of Britain, the thing about the matter of Britain is that the way that it kind of permeated out through the British Empire, right, and British history generally, it is it is inextricably linked with Christianity, right? Like you can't
Yeah.
separate Arthur from Christianity. You just can't do it. So the very, very, very earliest reference we have of Arthur, and as I mentioned to Ben the other day through Twitter, one of the most frustrating is, and it has to be accounted for because it's not just like a random reference either. This is like an established part of the lore. You have to include it, right? Like, is that Arthur was present at the Battle of Baden Hill. Okay. So
Yep.
Baden Hill is a historical battle. It's definitely real. Like we found the graves, we know it happened, right? Like 100% real. It drove back, I believe, the Saxons. I might be wrong about my barbarian horde, but I think it was the Saxons. Uh, it drove back the Saxons for quite a long time. It was a very important battle in British history. And in one of the earlier records of it, we see that there is a man named Arthur who is credited with something like 900 kills and who is called the Dux Bellorum, right? Which means like something like battle chief, Duke of Battles or something, or Lord of Battles or whatever. It was
Lord
a
of,
title.
yeah, Lord of War, Duke of War.
Lord of War. There you go. Yeah, it was a title. And it was a real title, by the way. There was something like it that we know was a real thing. It meant that this dude's job was to unite people together to fight, right? Um, they had like made him leader. Was Arthur real? Well, there are a few problems with this, like in a historical sense. And believe me, this is not just a random tangent. I have a point 'cause it's going to connect to what I was saying about why I felt this Lancelot book felt very weird and off. Um, okay, so there are a few problems with like, was this Arthur real? For one, we have exactly one reference to him, and that's this one guy, right? Who just like, and that's all he says about him. You would think arguments from silence are very difficult. You would think you'd get something though, wouldn't you? Like, that's not a
Yeah.
concrete argument. It's not a decisive argument that there was nothing there. And there was something though, right? Like as G.K. Chesterton points out, who, oh, learned man who never learned to learn, save to deduce by timid steps some small, from towering smoke that fire can never burn, or from tall tales that men were never tall. Say, have you learned what manner of man it is, of whom men say he could strike giants down? Or what strong memories over time's abyss bore up the pomp of Camelot and the crown, right? Um, and that's a very good point on Chesterton's part, and it's held true in many, many other situations. We know that the Trojan War was almost certainly based on a real thing. People will still try and deny it. I think it's at this point absurd to deny. Like, why make it up if there really was a war between Greece and Troy, which we know was real? It's like the people who go, Homer wasn't real. It was actually written by a completely different blind poet who happened to share the same name. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, it's
No.
yeah, same energy, right? No, he didn't base it on that war in Troy, right? Ridiculous. Like, yeah, okay, buddy. Um, it's also important to realize that, like, this is going to sound strange, but the concept of fiction is something that evolved very slowly, and they wouldn't even have thought of it in the same way. So I honestly do not think that the idea of making up the war whole cloth would even have like occurred to Homer in the way it would have occurred to us, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Like I don't think that Homer would have said, I need a war. I'm going to make up a war completely. Like, no, he would have said there's a war. Well, clearly there were things of great spiritual significance going on in the war, and this war had a massive effect on Greek history. So the gods and heroes were involved, and I'm going to call upon the muse to write about it. Right? Like,
Right.
it wasn't fiction in the way that we think of fiction. It's not that they weren't stupid, right? Like, it's not that
Right.
they necessarily thought all of these things literally happened the way that we do today, but the idea that it wasn't based on anything would have been odd to them, right? Like,
Yes.
what do you mean it wasn't based on anything? Then where did he then what happened? What is he talking about?
Right.
Um,
Why did everyone go, yeah, this sounds about right? Yeah, you know.
Right, like it's absurd. So I do think that there was something there. With King Arthur, you get the same sort of thing, right? Is something there. And that's the other thing. Christianity goes back to the very beginning of the story. Make no mistake, as G.K. Chesterton
Mhm.
again points out in The Ballad of the White Horse when writing about similar conflicts with Alfred the Great, um, Christianity is at the heart of these conflicts. It's
Yes.
the battle of the Christian world versus the barbarian hordes. And they very much knew this. Like, everybody is aware of this.
Mhm.
Okay, so we get that, and then we get in the very earliest start, and then we get like the Mabinogion, the Welsh Arthur stories. Christianity is always a part of this. It's inextricably linked to the Arthur legend. Maybe the Arthur legend arose out of this great hero of Baden Hill, right?
Right.
Maybe, um, in my preferred theory, is that Arthur is kind of a combination. There was probably some hero at Baden Hill, and then there was a king named Aurelianus. Now, people who know their Arthur lore well will know Aurelianus as the uncle of Arthur, right? Uther's his father, Aurelianus
Right.
is his brother. So, but if you actually look into Aurelianus's history and like what he did, he is a very good match for Arthur, right? Like, he was a high king who united the British peoples, who drove out the barbarians.
Mhm.
So I think they probably took this, but because Arthur was already like a separate name when Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote the history, he just made Aurelianus an uncle, and then said and there was an even greater king, right? Like, who came right after him.
Right.
And then that gives us the Arthur legend. And then you could throw in some of the historical stuff. The point being that Christianity is right in the middle of all of this, right?
Mhm.
Um, it's there. It is completely present. You can't get around it. It's just from the very beginning. Again, like, make no mistake, it's there at Baden Hill, right? Like,
Yes.
they knew it. They 100% knew it. They were extremely aware of what Baden Hill meant, which was Christianity has defeated the pagan hordes, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you cannot unlink Arthur from Christianity. The way that the story evolved, right? The Grail legends become a massive part of it. The Le Morte d'Arthur has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of Grail legends, right? Of
Yeah.
Grail quests. This is a huge part of the lore. So when I see a story that attempts to be like, I want to do the historical Arthur, I'm going to de-Christianize it, right? The alarm bells go off because I'm
Yeah.
like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, there is no
Yeah.
world where de-Christianizing the Arthur stories makes sense, except but this is where like the historical critical method is extremely flawed, right?
Yeah.
Whenever people told stories about Arthur, Christianity is at the center of it. Yeah. Uh, I,
Even some of the poets of which we only have the barest fragments have a Christian heroism to them mixed in with the pagan melancholy, more like Beowulf than pure pagan desolation. Like it's uh, not depression, fatalism. Like there's not as much overt Christianity as you might think, but it's in the spirit of how Arthur talks. He talks of his friends as if they're still alive, even though he's speaking of their adventures in a very melancholic past sense. That's not a pagan belief. That's a Christian belief, where man sleeps rather than die. Christian men.
Yeah, there you go. By the way, I actually undersold a little the connection between Aurelianus and Arthur, which is why I'm very convinced that Aurelianus is like the main source of the Arthur legend. He was actually the guy at Baden Hill.
All right.
So I forgot this. So that actually, it's pretty good, right?
Right.
Ambrosius Aurelianus organized a British resistance with the survivors of the initial Saxon onslaught. And then in the Welsh annals, that's where they say the 12th battle was on Mount Baden. And then there fell in one day 960 men from one charge by Arthur, and no one struck them down except Arthur himself.
What a man. What a legend.
And Arthur carried the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ for 3 days and 3 nights upon his shield, and the Britons were victors. Again, though, I really want you to note this, right? Christianity, the second Arthur source, is explicit about it. Literally the second one.
Yes.
And also, Gildas, when talking about the battle, this is how he puts it. He's the historian who first writes about Baden. From that time, the citizens were sometimes victorious, sometimes the enemy, in order that the Lord, according to his wont, might try in this nation the Israel of today, whether it loves him or not. This continued up to the year of the siege of Baden Hill, and of almost the last great slaughter inflicted upon the rascally crew. Also, what a great translation. I love that. Upon the rascally crew.
Very English.
Yeah, it's great. So, again, this corroborates my point, right? Like, even in the earliest sources, Battle of Baden, this was the battle of the Christians against the barbarians. The Christians won, right? Very, very important. Okay. So, you got all of this. And then you go, I want to do the historical Arthur. But, Christianity is not going to be, that's not the point, right?
Right.
My brother in Christ, what are you talking about?
Christianity is the point.
It was always the point. From the very, very, very earliest Arthurian sources, right?
Yes.
Christianity is front and center to why Arthur is important and what he is doing, right?
Yes.
Arthur as a Christian king is the center of the story. So I've seen people go I've tried to Stephen Lawhead in the Pendragon Cycle. He does this whole thing of but he goes, I try to make him Welsh, but he's also and I made sure to make him Christian, right? I made it very explicitly Christian. So I love the Pendragon Cycle. And sure, there's a significant Welsh influence on Arthur. A Welsh-centered Arthur makes sense. With apologies to Ben, who I know hates this, there is actually some evidence that there is a lot of Irish influence on Arthur. There was a King Arthur from Ireland.
Anthony, Arthur wasn't black. He can't be Irish.
Yes. Arthur, yeah, he was Italian. What? Arthur was white. No. Anyway, point is, so I'm game for alternate takes on Arthur. It's a very flexible legend, right? I'm down for this, but there is what's called a mythium. This is something I actually learned in a very good myth and culture class. I know this is surprising. I really liked the teacher because I drove the teacher nuts because she would quiz us and none of them knew anything about mythology except for me. And then she would ask us how many of you know what a succubus is? And I would be the only one who raised my hand. She goes, you don't count. You skew my data.
Chud, Anthony.
Yes. And then I ended up writing my final paper. She did think that Lewis was sexist in the last battle, and I argued with her over it. But to her credit, she did let me argue with her at least, which is, I think, that's game.
Yeah, that's game, yeah.
And I wrote my final paper on the last battle. But anyway, so that was pretty dope. But one of the concepts that came up in that class that I do agree with and actually has served me very well is the mythium of the story, right? So a mythium is what is the central core of the story? what is it really about? Well, I don't think you could separate Christianity from the myth theme of King Arthur, right? Like, you could say, oh, it's about a great king. No, there are many great kings, right? Like, Gilgamesh is a great king. You know, Odysseus, for that matter, is a great king if you really want to be persnickety about it. But the thing that makes Arthur is he is the model Christian king, right? Like, that's why Arthur is different. So you
Yes.
can't you can't go to the sources and then conclude that Christianity somehow got corrupted into it later, right? By those wily monks. You know, there is no earlier source without the Christianity. It doesn't exist. You know, like it's not even the case where, oh, Christianity got so entwined with the legend we can't imagine it without it. No, what I'm saying is actually even stronger than that. There is no version of the Arthur legend without Christianity.
Yes.
Like, it does not exist. You can't find it ever, at any point in its existence. Okay, so Christianity is central, critical, the entire point in many ways of the Arthur legend. He is the ideal Christian king. That is what he represented. It is what he exists to teach us, right? Like how to rule ideally as a Christian. And then like how you live in a Christian kingdom. You know, what happens and how these things fall, for that matter. That's where the Mordred and Lancelot and Guinevere, they all come in later. But I think they tell us something very important, like how sin creeps in, how they infect these places, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said here. So I'm reading this book, Lancelot, by Christian Giles, I believe his name is. So ironically, his name is Christian. And there's just something really off about it. It's extraordinarily pagan, right? Merlin multiple times, and this eventually I had to drop the book because it was so retarded. Merlin multiple times makes comments that Christianity is it caused the Roman Empire to fall, and now we're going to fall to the barbarian horde surrounding us because we became weak from Christianity, which is an absurd opposite of the truth. Like, number one, I don't think that he really notices the contradiction here. If Christianity is going to win, aren't you the weak one?
Right.
Like, this is a serious contradiction that pagans constantly fall into, right? And there's no real way around it because in fact, we know there's no way around it because they didn't get around it. This is literally why the pagans converted, right?
Yep.
At least many of them, right? By their own logic, if Christianity beat them, then their gods lost.
Yep.
So, like, what are you doing here? Like, the idea of the ancient pagans would have found the entire concept of a revival of paganism to be utterly absurd. Like, wait a minute, you're going to worship these defeated gods, right? Disgraced, humiliated gods whose lands are ruled by the Christian cross.
Right.
Like, what's the point of that? Why don't you just go to the Christian god?
Odin was afraid of death. Jesus Christ rose from the grave.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't real. It's like, I have to tell you this, bud. But if Jesus wasn't real, why in the world is Odin real? Well, he just is. He just is. Okay.
Really? It's absurd, right? So you get Merlin, they make Merlin a druid. I find this really gross, honestly. Once again, Merlin is another one where, like, Jeffrey Ash wrote a great book on this. Like, he's one of the more interesting Arthurian figures because he seems like one of the most likely to be fake. And in fact, he is one of the only ones who we know, without a shadow of a doubt, has a very real and specific historical core, who was 100%, no doubt, a real person. Right? Like, there was a guy, his name was Merlin. He was a monk. He went insane. This is real. He, like, went to the woods because, like, I forget exactly what happened. It might have been, like, his wife died, and that's how he became a hermit. Yeah. He went insane and ran off into the woods. and then he got a reputation as a holy hermit, and people would like go to him for advice. Um, this is Merlin. This is the origin of Merlin, right? So
Right.
this idea that Merlin is a druid, I find to be like insulting. You know,
Yeah.
he was a monk, he was a hermit, he was very Christian.
He was a
Again,
holy
this is
man.
like the core of the stories. So this isn't a going back to the historicity of it. This is a rewriting of it, but more specifically, I think this is a sort of violence to the story, right? Like you're not preserving the mytheme of the story by doing this. You are fundamentally changing it into something that really can't be called like the King Arthur myth anymore in any reasonable way, right?
Right.
And there's just a lot of weird things about the book. It made me like vaguely it felt vaguely slimy to read, but in ways that are not really clear. Like I could easily imagine describing the book to someone. I'm going, I don't understand what your issue is. It sounds fine, right? And even
Right.
somebody who is not as perceptive to these sort of things as I am, or maybe as sensitive, if you want to be more negative, right, to
Mm-hmm.
these sorts of things as I am, reading it, going like, I don't know, it seems fine to me, right? And
Right.
I'm going, you don't feel it though? There's something off, right? Like, this is an example. Lancelot, his family is murdered. This is how they start his backstory. His family is murdered in front of him. He's taken in by people and brought to an island where he's trained in war, and he realizes like he's very good at war. They reveal that the island is like ruled by someone who I think is the Lady of the Lake. Is it's implied? Yeah, and she
Mm.
trains young men who are sent there in Warcraft with, other men there. She's not the trainer. To be like, I want to be clear, it's not that bad.
She's just
Right.
the dame who happens to be there.
Yes, exactly. And so they do have like men on the island who do the training, and there are young women who are sent to the islands who by their families, like basically she provides a service where she keeps them virgins until their wedding day and then they're married off. Um
Based.
based this is and this is how Lancelot originally meets Guinevere. So Guinevere is sent to this island. Okay. So they do all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Lancelot's on the island, and Guinevere shows up as the daughter of Leo de Grance, who sent her to the island so that she remains a virgin. They fall in love, right? Okay. Once again, I describe all of this, and you're like, that sounds interesting, right? Like, that's at least an interesting take on it, this idea of giving Lancelot and Guinevere history in advance. But certain things happen in the book. For example, Lancelot's mentor, who is a very positive character in it, on the island, like, he gets deathly ill, and he asks Lancelot to kill him. Because he says, like, he's just going to die a very slow and painful death, So right off the bat, I'm like, that's really strange. Right? Like something's off about this. And it's like,
that wouldn't be something that happens
yes,
in a
it
medieval
wouldn't.
society. Like sure, there's been plenty of people who have wished for death, and everyone's just like, he's just really sick. He'll, don't do it. But at the same time, like, it's not a Christian behavior.
Right. I think that's what I didn't like about it. It's like, okay, I understand that this is meant to be like defensive. It was like a coming of age moment for Lancelot, right? Like he did this thing for his mentor,
Yeah.
and everybody respects him for it, even though he didn't do it in front of anyone, but they all kind of know he did it, but none of them say anything, right?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, this is wrong though. Something's wrong here, right? Because you're right. And the answer to this is that's not Christian behavior. A Christian does not believe in assisted suicide, right? Like they don't believe in mercy killing. They don't believe in euthanasia.
It's like, it's not like he said, "Oh, take me off the life support machines. Every instance is agony."
No, he said, "Stab me."
Right. Which is different, and it hurts the soul of the person doing it. Like, this is very not King Arthur.
Correct. It's a very modern way of thinking, right? Where he goes like, "Oh, I want to die a warrior's death. I shouldn't die a slow death." Like, no, like
By getting stabbed on his sick bed.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But there's another scene. So again, like I can imagine a modern reading it, and I could see why it got good reviews and thinking nothing of it except like, oh, it makes perfect sense because it does, right? Like from a
Mm.
in a vacuum. This is what I mean. People visit the island, and one of them tries to rape Guinevere, right? And Lancelot kills him. Now, I have zero problem with this so far, right? Like that is a
Right.
perfectly acceptable series of events to occur, perfectly acceptable action for Lancelot to take, you know.
Yep.
And then they hide the body with the help of Ban, who remember is Lancelot's cousin. Um, Again,
Mhm.
all fine. What was weird is that they have this scene, and then immediately afterward, they have a sex scene where Lancelot and Guinevere, but like basically on the corpse of the dude that Lancelot just murdered. Well, not murdered, I guess I should be fair, killed, right?
Right.
And well, like covered in blood and guts and gore. And I'm like, this is weird.
Yep.
Like, this is creepy, honestly.
It's like I can see how he could justify it to his editor. It's the culmination of their emotional togetherness. To screw over
I could see
something.
how it's justified in a lot of ways. You could even go, well, it's meant to be a little disturbing, right? Like,
Right.
and indeed it is. It is quite
It's,
disturbing.
you did it.
Um,
You did it. Good job.
yeah, you did it. But and then after this, Guinevere is taken off the island to presumably be married off, probably to Arthur, though we haven't seen him yet. It's also possible she was married off to someone else, and then Arthur like killed him. I don't know. I didn't finish the book, so I don't know.
He, Arthur kills a lot of people in his myth.
He does.
He does. He's actually like
He's quite deadly.
he's quite deadly. Now they deserve it, and they do make war on him first. But he's on the field. He earns his bona fides. Uh, the Green Knight that Ari Aster did, which the more I deal with his type, nor I think he is, tearing at Arthur, even though he wasn't allowed to directly tear at Arthur, making him kind of a frail old man, which in the timeline of the Green Knight doesn't work out because it's pre Grail. Like Arthur, more to the central point of this stream, like Arthur isn't an old man before the Green Knight, and he's about to become older when the Grail quest starts. Like he's upper middle aged, I guess I'd say, during Grail. So like it doesn't work for that interpretation, but it's like the idea that Arthur, who leads the Battle of Camlin from the front, isn't able to kick ass from his like 13-year-old to his 60s, I guess, is laughable, if not
Yep,
slender.
you're absolutely correct about this.
Anyway,
Uh, yeah, I fully agree with you, but yeah, it's the point being though, like I didn't finish the book, so I don't know how Guinevere ends up in the story. I don't know if Arthur was the person she was married to, or if Arthur kills the person she was married to, or what, right? Or some other third creative thing that I didn't think of. I dropped it after Merlin started going on about how Christianity is making them weak and liable to be conquered, and also the entire island is going to become Christian. And I'm like, you fucking retard! Did you not just catch your own contradiction?
Arthur's like, yes, this is what I want, and Merlin's like tearing at his beard. No, it's bad.
But then Arthur goes, didn't you just say that they would win?
I thought you
It's
were the
like,
son of the Antichrist. Why would I believe you in this?
yes. Um, and apparently in this world he wasn't baptized either. Uh, okay, so there was something like that sex scene just felt really, really wrong off, right? And there was just something like about the novel that was just way, way too pagan. And I think that it comes from it comes from just this very typical modern problem of we don't understand how people can believe this stuff, right?
Right.
Like we go, obviously they didn't really, like Christianity won. They didn't really believe it, right? Whereas if you read the Arthur legends, they're saying stuff like, I would never do this because as a Christian, this is a dishonorable and act that my God would hate constantly. Right? Like,
Yes.
my God would not permit me to do this. Like they are constantly justifying their decisions based on, I'm trying to think of how to put it.
Spiritual reasoning.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, right? Like spiritual reasoning. It's constantly something that's in the forefront of their minds, right? That
Right.
they're making their decisions on. Does God want me to do this? Is this the Christian thing to do?
Right.
Yeah.
And then God sends them a sign that says, "Smite your enemies, kill them all," and they willingly, they gleefully go into the battle because they're not worried about their own death. Mallory and other subjects are very clear that the reason why they threw themselves into battle constantly is because they just weren't worried about the state of their souls, nearly as much as some would think. Yeah, they anytime they passed a church, they had mass, or prayed at the cross. Anytime they met a hermit, they would, say something like, "Pray for me," or, what is there that God has for me to do here? Like uh, the whole spirit isn't some sort of the night questant, isn't some sort of, oh, we'll just, be nobles and bully the peasants. The plebs deserve to be stepped on. It's entirely a submission that they, as much as the pastor is, or the priest, or whatever term you want, is, the shepherd for the flock, they are the shepherd for the people of the land, in a military kind of way. It's a hierarchy. Like, people accuse Protestants of having no spiritual hierarchy. No, no, no. There's a spiritual hierarchy. It's just God, pastor, father, mother, children. It's a very small hierarchy, but in the grand hierarchy of life, they understood themselves as part of the great chain. From God to the king, and parallel to the Pope, say, down to his nobles, and the nobles under those nobles, and the knights under those nobles. Like, there was a whole system that to them was easy as breathing, to live by. Well, not like live by morally, but in the sense of, like, yes, this is my proper place. Um, Even people going like, well, they were ambitious, they schemed and connived. They don't get the point. Like, they didn't scheme to, you know, um, to rape and murder and have prima nocta. They schemed because they thought that the king was not, put up by God, and they thought they could put their own butt on the throne, or the appropriate high noble. Like, it's more complicated than just, they do good to save their souls. No, their souls are saved, so they do good, and all the other signs that most adaptions just kind of don't talk about.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. Like, I feel like trying to separate it, and even let's me put it another way. T.H. White wrote a very modernistic, sort of secular version of the Arthur legend in The Once and Future King. And even in The Once and Future King, he was smart enough not to remove the Christianity, knowing it was too central to the legend to do it. In
Yep.
fact, he actually makes it completely central to Lancelot's character, which is exactly right, and I think very smart on his part, and the reason why The Ill-Made Knight is the best book. Uh, because it creates what was really the central conflict of Lancelot's life. His lust for Guinevere, contrasting with his genuine Christian piety.
Yep.
Like, he knows that it's wrong, and he's not proud of it, but he wants it anyway.
Yeah. It's one of those things where the drama of it is kind of lost in our modern time because people don't understand the juxtaposition of someone who sins and someone who also wants to serve Christ. Like, fundamentally, my pastor, from all outside points, has, the signs of a very holy life. However, I know that, he has moments of wrath. I know that, and of course, he deals with it, and there's a reason why he's the pastor. He deals with it better than I do. But it's one of those things where it's like I don't begrudge him his sin if he's clearly in repentance and working on it. Uh, what I would begrudge is if he has no if he submits himself to his sin constantly. We joked about popes going to hell earlier. It's the same sort of idea. All Christians can choose to avoid their sin. It's thrown into their faces often, lust especially. You see a beautiful woman, where do your thoughts wander? Either her luscious breasts or her fat posterior, as they say on the streets. Like
On
there's
the streets.
on the streets.
Oh, girl, you got a fat posterior.
You white. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. Sorry.
Thanks,
Anyway,
Jamal.
but uh, but it's not that flash, right? It's never the flash, the temptation that damns. It's the action. If Lancelot just burned with lust for Guinevere and never acted on it, it wouldn't have been the same sort of thing. He could have separated himself. In fact, he does within his own stories. Mallory and quite a few of the main canon ones, where he actually leaves Camelot for a very long time, years, on questing adventures, because he wants to separate himself and not give in to his lust for Guinevere. It's actually, one of the, like, Lancelot has like these fourths, but they're more like, 2/3 and then a sixth on either side, where he's like before Arthur, Camelot, dealing with Guinevere and tournaments and stuff like that. The second third is him separating from Guinevere, and then the last one is him coming back to Guinevere, where he fulfills his lust again. There's a very human pattern to this. He is not in a state of sin in this particular way. Then he gets into a state of sin. He repents of that sin, goes out, but that sin comes back to him, and he submits himself to it again. Even though at the end of his life, he of course repents of it. He repents of it even as it's happening, quite frankly. But he is a man, and he deals with his consequences. Like there's like this modern world doesn't understand repentance. It doesn't understand uh like the life of a holy man, how to live holy and all this jazz. They view it as one mistake, you failed, but they actually don't apply it equally. And so you're stuck dealing with people who go like, oh, this is this. The reason why like we apply it to people like the I Kiss Dating Goodbye guy is because his marriage failed, and he didn't follow his own advice, and he wrote it before he was married, and a whole bunch of other things, and many people were hurt by it. But then some other people will say, oh, he used to be this. It's like, yeah, he used to be this. He's repented of it. He doesn't go out and carouse anymore, or we know where he is because he submitted himself to discipline in the church. you know uh it's it's an understanding that's lost. They view the loss of trust as something that will never be regained, and sure, as it was before. But in reality, if there was a man in the church who had a sexual sin, it's like, okay, if you want to go out and whore, but you're repenting of it, that's a loss of, like, you can't be a deacon, you can't be an elder, and you're, how do I want to put it? Like, if your wife asks to put a tracker on your phone, you're just going to have to accept that. Like, it's there's ways to mitigate that loss of trust that people don't accept. They look at Lancelot, and see the sin with Guinevere, but they don't actually see the man who's tormented by that sin, who doesn't want it, but rather wants to give himself back to God. There we go. I got it. I got what I wanted to say. I got there.
You did. No, and your point's very accurate, I think. This is why, like I've mentioned this on the show before. Blech, sneezing. But my favorite line in The Ill-Made Knight is actually a quote from Mallory, right? And it's that and it's that Arthur wants they want Lancelot to revive a man who died in the joust. And Lancelot doesn't want to do it because he's no longer a virgin, right? And he knows it won't work, but the people don't know he's not a virgin. So they, one by one, they ask everybody else to pray over this dead man, but the people are just clamoring for Lancelot. It's known that Lancelot's a holy man. He does miracles, right? And finally, with great reluctance and basically under like orders from Arthur, Lancelot comes out and prays over the man, and he revives, right? And there's this line in The Ill-Made Knight, this extremely enigmatic line where he quotes Mallory. This is a White original line. He says, "The real miracle was that a miracle was allowed to happen at all." Right? And then the final line of the book. And then, says Mallory, Lancelot wept as a child who had been beaten. Extraordinarily enigmatic final line. One of my favorite final lines of any book. Because it really does give this impression of, in a way, having the miracle work was kind of the punishment, right? Because Lancelot knew he wasn't worthy, and he was going to get this praise that he knew he didn't deserve, but he was going to get it anyway, right? Because he needed to be taught this lesson. The glory was not to him, it was to God. Sorry, my thing died for a second. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay,
no, you're right. It is to God, and they understood it. Like, they fought for it. They treated it like it was to God. When people bring up this paganism versus Christianity debate, there's they talk about gods, but they don't actually understand gods, if that makes sense. Like when the first lines of the Iliad, which we've quoted on here many times, Sing, O Muse of the rage of Achilles, Peleus' son, who by wrath something the Achaeans, and for the delicate feasting of the dogs, and the will of Zeus was accomplished.
It's the Lombardo version has my favorite. Sing, goddess of Achilles' rage, black and murderous, who caused the Greeks incalculable pain, pitched countless souls of heroes into Hades' dark, and left the rest to rot as feasts for dogs and birds. So Zeus's will was done.
Every single listener of Homer, even into just before modern times, like let's say 1900 or so, would have completely understood that, and understood it in both like in a universal ecumenical way, in the same way that I might write to fulfill the will of God, or a officer of the law will fulfill the law, which in a ordered society is a part of God's will. So too did these knights understand it. So too did the Greeks understand it, that it was the will of God to be accomplished.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we talked about this once a long time ago, but I read a fascinating article from just a random guy on a blog I like, but it was a very good article that was about the Muse. And the article was basically like, yeah, I think the muse is real. And he was like being completely serious. He's like, this was a Christian talking, right? Like a Catholic, I believe. And he goes, yeah, I think the muse is 100% real. And he goes like, but what do I mean by the muse? It's like, well, throughout history, all basically is a universal thing that all of the great artists are completely sure that their stories and their skill come from a source that is outside of them, right?
Yep.
And we don't really have a name for that source, but the Greeks called it the muse, right? So he's like, do I believe in the muse? 100%. Absolutely. It is a almost universally attested thing throughout history. You know, anybody who creates art is very, very aware. Like, there is a thing that is coming to you that is not from you. It is not being formed by you. You are almost channeling something, right? You're channeling that spirit
Right.
of the arts. And I do think that the muse is, I actually think this dovetails very well with things like the Bible and biblical inerrancy, right?
Yep.
Because who is the muse that inspired the Bible? Well, that's easy. It's the Holy Spirit, right? Um, the Bible is unique in that way. It is unique in that the muse that inspired the Bible is the Holy Spirit. Therefore, it contains the greatest art of all books, right?
Right.
Literally the canticle of canticles, the song of songs, you know. Um, among of course all of its other writings. And then you have like the muse that inspired the Greeks. I'm sure it could have been any number of angels or spirits. That's the other thing too. Like, I actually think there is quite a lot of synergy between, like, people go like, oh, well, the church's teaching on like angels or spirits or gods or whatever evolved over time. I actually think it's evolved less than people think and not the way that people think.
Yep.
Because I think that what we call gods would slot perfectly well under the definition that we have for angels. Like, what is an angel actually, right? Well, an angel is a creature, it is an unbodied creature, right? A creature of pure mind that is complete in itself as a spirit. Okay, got it, right? And that's the key
Right.
distinction here, right? The key distinction is that the two key distinctions that A, it's created because of course God is a spirit, right? So but God's not created, so it's doesn't matter. Um, but B, it is complete in itself as a spirit. Therefore, even if an angel were to somehow become incarnate in some way, which by the way, is recorded, does happen. It's mentioned in the Old Testament with the Nephilim. It's also mentioned in the Deuterocanonical book of Tobit, but we don't even need to mention that. We'll just go with the
Also,
Nephilim.
the story of Abraham and Lot.
Yeah, there you go. That's
Angels who
another one.
walk into Sodom and Gomorrah and are and the Sodomites. I mean this not in a non-homosexual way. Attempt to rape the two men-looking angels.
Which is
Uh,
hilarious because it's gone back to being in a homosexual way.
Whoa, that's crazy. Anyway, the point is that they look like men. They were good-looking men. Nobody mistook them for, how do I want to put it? They weren't biblically accurate.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. So we get the Nephilim are a particularly interesting example because apparently the bodies that they got were capable of producing children. Which, by the way, I do believe that is what happened. That is my preferred theory.
I blame
Um,
women.
yeah, I blame women. Um, yeah, women falling in love with monsters is a story as old as the Bible. What can I tell you?
Yep, yep.
But like, if you think about what a spirit, what an angel is, like definitionally, what we mean when we say angel, that's literally all it means, right? Thomas Aquinas makes the argument that every angel is in fact its own unique and individual species. Like, there is no species of creature called an angel; it's just a category, right? Um,
Right,
and I think that this is probably right. So when you make that distinction, you go, okay, well, what is a god, right? Like,
right.
the Greeks knew that the gods weren't people, Like, they didn't think the gods were embodied, or if they did think they were embodied, they thought they were embodied in the same way that angels could occasionally be embodied, like that they took on bodies,
Yeah.
right? Like, so I don't really see why we would go like, well, of course I think that the gods were real. Like, we believe that they kind of all we kind of believe they exist right now. You know,
Right.
I believe in evil angels. I believe in good angels too. Um,
Right.
so like, why couldn't they
I've
have
seen
worshipped
videos
angels? I don't
online.
really see why they wouldn't.
Right. I've seen videos online of people taunting Zeus and then getting struck by lightning. Now, admittedly, they were holding a metal rod to the sky, but I've seen the videos. Okay.
I mean, granted, they might have just been retarded, but you know, it happened.
We love them for it.
Yes. Um, the point being, though, like, I also do. I can't prove this, and I don't know how you would prove this. I don't think it's possible to prove this, but I suspect that the power of the pagan gods decreased significantly after the resurrection.
Yes.
Uh, I don't know how you would prove this. I don't know that it's possible to prove this, but that's just way too plausible to me to
Oh
not
yeah.
be true.
Well, it's like there's clearly a before and after, both in Roman and in other pagan situations. Um, both as the Jesus's life as a fulfillment of a lot of Eastern stuff, and how just a change in how the Romans treated their gods after the resurrection. And not just because of some influence from Christianity. I'm talking like in the time of Augustus. Um, the if you read things like say during the Punic Wars and other wars that they've had, there's a certain reverence for the gods, little g, that the Romans had, that they acted on. Fabius of Fabian Tactics paused the campaign just to make sure the sacrifices are right and led a what we would call a religious revival, or at least that's what the text reads to me. um he corrected their practices, made sure that the right gods were given their sacrifices. um they had mystery cults like the cult of Mithras. You don't have mystery cults without the ability to be in a cult, as a, and not as a, I don't mean this in the sense of like a rube being swindled by some slick talking preacher man. I mean in the sense of you go into a secret bunker, a little underground temple, and then you sit in a pit, and a bull is killed over you, and blood pours all over you. Like, you don't just do that if you're a rube. Does that make sense? Like, it's too sophisticated for what we would like for a cult leader in Appalachia or something like that, or LA. uh but
Yes.
after the resurrection, there's a definite change to more cult, and then it that cult behavior declines in a good way into Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, it even gets notable, like, even in the Americas. This is a very famous story, and historians are very embarrassed by it because, frankly, it does not reflect well on the pagan cultures. But of the conquistadors showing up and fulfilling pagan prophecies and then ending their entire freaking civilization. Yeah. Um,
We love our
like,
conquistadors here, don't we, folks?
yes. Like Moctezuma being convinced that they were like the god Quetzalcoatl returning, right? Like, but this is all, I actually think this is very notable. Like, historians are very embarrassed by this. You will sometimes see them trying to deny it. In my opinion, it seems very clear to me that this is in fact what happened. They really did think that like the Spaniards were gods. Um, or at least they thought it was. Perhaps I should amend that. They thought it was a very legitimate possibility that the Spaniards were gods.
They certainly acted like the Spaniards were gods.
Yes, 100%. And like people at the time are reporting it, so like there's some modern day revisionism. People are like, no, of course they, and like, I actually think they did, based on the sources, and even this, like, I want you to think about this for a moment. You have this foreign culture entirely on the opposite side of the world, and their prophecies tell them that when the Christians show up, the sacrifices stop. Like,
Yes.
even then, it's like the Christians arrive and ends it. Pizarro conquers the Incan Empire with 7 men.
Yeah.
And Pizarro is no Cortez. Like, Cortez
No.
was, as we've discussed before, he was a great man of history. He was certainly personally flawed. In fact, in similar ways to Lancelot, there's some parallels here, right? But he cheated on his wife. He was a womanizer. He was rather arrogant, but he was very much he was a believing Christian who seemed to be genuinely concerned about the conversion of the pagans. Like, it was not. It wasn't just talk to him, right? He really did believe in it. And he was an extraordinarily effective and charismatic leader. Pizarro was, in fact, something of a scoundrel. Francisco Pizarro was not a good man. He was maybe a believing Christian, but he was a bad Christian.
Yeah, I mean, the story of his death is that he painted the sign of a cross as he was from his own throat blood, and it's like,
yes,
okay,
I'll buy that, right? Like, I hope it was a sincere, moment,
right? Not just because he was going to meet his maker in the immediate, that it was a genuine, yeah.
Yeah, you're correct. That is a very famous Pizarro story, and good for him. Like, and that sounds like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm really not.
Getting stabbed. Good.
Yeah.
No,
it's good that he died and made a visible sign of devotion to Christ.
Yes.
It bodes well for his eternal soul. But nevertheless, when you look through Pizarro's life, unlike Cortez, who, he had the greatness to balance the faults, Pizarro was kind of a scoundrel.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kidnaps Atahualpa, and then basically, like, he tricks Atahualpa, the Incan emperor, and then basically basically brags about the fact that he's like, we just said we kill him, so he gave us 7 rooms worth of gold, and now he's our bitch. And Cortez, like, you can really contrast that with the way that Cortez treated Moctezuma. Like, again, there's so many things that people don't realize was going on with the conquistadors. Like, for example, the conquistadors, the Mexican conquistadors, I should say, to separate them from Pizarro and the Incan conquistadors, right? The Mexican conquistadors, what people don't realize is just how moral Cortez was trying to be, right? Like, he was making very legitimate, strong efforts to keep his men in line. That's why, like, yes, there is the whole incident, like, the Spaniards started killing the Aztecs, and then the Aztecs rose up, and then they were driven out of Tenochtitlan, right? Like, but what a lot of people don't realize about this is that it happened when Cortez was gone, right? Like, he left and then came back, and you can kind of imagine, it's like, what happened? I was only gone for a few weeks. It's like, well,
these guys.
Yeah, about that. So there's the massacre in the Great Temple happening. He's like, massacre in the Great Temple. I was gone a week. But, okay. Like, that whole thing happened when Cortez was gone. And there are actually reports of, like, the Spaniards going, like, when Cortez was there, he was like, they knew the Aztecs were evil. They knew what they were doing. But he was like, look, this is clearly, we have stumbled upon a backwards pagan people who have not known Christ. So it is our job to be the light of Christ to them. They clearly do not have our morality, right? They don't understand it. So we are going to convert them. And he, like, gave strict orders to the Spaniards not to mistreat the people, right? Like, they kept Moctezuma alive. Now, again, there's a little bit of self-serving going on here because he was using Moctezuma. And there were the reports of it are very interesting. They vary, right, of Moctezuma's death, because there are two versions of it. Like the Spanish version of the story is that the Aztecs stoned Moctezuma to death because they were tired of how much of a pussy he was. And the
Which
yeah.
I could believe a pagan society would stone their
Oh, I'd
pusillanimous.
100%
Yeah,
believe it. They were like tired of it because they were tired of it because the Spaniards were kind of using Moctezuma as their mouthpiece, and again, he was treating them kind of like gods, right?
yeah,
Like, and the Aztec version of the story was that the Spaniards killed Moctezuma because they weren't listening to him anymore, so he wasn't useful to them.
yeah.
To be honest, both stories are very plausible, so it's hard to say which one is true. Either way, Moctezuma's dead. And the thing that's notable to me, though, is that Cortez tried to keep him alive, right?
Right.
Like, he tried, and he kept him alive for a long time. Like, there was a long period while Cortez was there where they were, like, ruling Tenochtitlan through Moctezuma, and things really weren't going that badly, right?
Right.
Like, it was actually going quite well. Like, it's unfortunate that Cortez had that issue that many great men have, in that he was like completely irreplaceable. You
Yeah.
know, his charisma was singular, and nobody else had it. So with him gone, like, and even just absent, not even gone, right? Like,
Right.
with him absent, things fell apart very quickly because only he had the force of personality to keep everybody in line and impose his will on the situation.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, like, just him being gone for a few weeks meant that that whole project kind of died. Yeah. Which is a shame. But yeah, like, it's very interesting. Like, when you see Cortez, the Mexican conquistadors are actually surprisingly moral. That's not to say they never did anything wrong. Again, even the massacre in the Great Temple, there's like the Spanish version and the pagan version of the story. The Spanish version of the story is that they are like, well, man, they were like killing women and children, and they were killing dancers, and we had to stop it. And the Aztec version, which, by the way, in this case, I find the Aztec version to be absurd, is like,
No.
there we were minding our own business, just doing nothing, when the Spaniards came in and said, "Give us all your gold." And when we said no, they just killed all of us. And I'm like, that did not happen. That's not what happened. With
A
that
little
said,
doubtful.
yeah, with that said, the Spanish version sounds more plausible to me, and one of the reasons it sounds more plausible is that the Spaniards do not excuse themselves of their actions, right?
Right.
Like, it's not like they say this and then they go, "And therefore we were fully justified in what they did." They're like, actually, like, the chroniclers who write about this are like, "What we did was horrible, and it was a massive mistake, and we violently regret it." And there were several of the Spaniards did evil things,
Yeah.
but so, like, this, which is why it makes the Spanish version sound much more plausible to me. It's also like, you have to imagine this as being somewhat similar to something like the My Lai massacre, right?
Right.
Where it's like, no, you can't excuse it, right? Like,
Right.
yes, it was bad, but also consider the situation they're in, being surrounded by people who, it's hard to fathom how evil the Aztecs were. You kind of can't exaggerate it.
Right. Like,
when you're constantly surrounded by people who are just next level evil, right? Like,
yes.
it's really not that shocking that you would see them do something as heinous as, like, and then they start executing the dancers, and then you just snap,
Yeah.
and then you just start killing everyone, going like, no, they got to be destroyed, right?
Yep.
And then, like, no, that doesn't excuse, like, they were killing children, like, they were slitting women's stomachs open, right? Like,
Right.
that doesn't excuse any of it. And they weren't excused for it. Again, Cortez was very, very unhappy to see what had happened. He was like, "How could you have let this happen? Like, that's a utterly embarrassing failure of leadership, if nothing else."
Right.
But like, I don't think it's as simple as like they just were really greedy and wanted gold. It doesn't fit the MO of what they were doing there at all, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, I went on a tangent here, but we love the conquistadors here, as you said. So
We do.
the point of the tangent is like the light of Christianity coming to these pagan worlds seems to change things extraordinarily quickly in a way that can't readily be explained by technology. And generally, as much as they would like to deny it nowadays, for the better.
Yes.
Um,
Very much for the better.
the Incan, it's really funny because even people don't make as much hay out of the Incan Empire, right? Like they go, okay, yeah, we all know the Aztecs were evil, but Pizarro was a scoundrel, and like the Incans, they were just enslaving them and destroying them. It's like, all right, but what they don't tell you are about the massive child sacrifice kits throughout the Incan Empire, right?
Everywhere.
That the Spaniards ended.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, they're all over the Incan Empire. They don't tell you about the fact that they were basically a totalitarian police state.
Yep.
Like, the Incan Empire was fucking evil. Now, does that make Pizarro not a scoundrel? Does that make the Spaniards, like, strictly moral? No, it does not. Right? And I'm
Right.
not claiming that they were. Especially in Pizarro's case. Nevertheless, let's not act like the Incan Empire wasn't horrendously evil.
Yeah. It's we've sort of moved far afield, but what we're talking about in the spirit of it is basically the pagan versus Christian mindset. Like ignoring the Greeks and the Romans, right? One of the benefits of the Aztecs and the Incas is that we can see a literate, not like universal literate, not universal literacy is very recent, but like a literate priest caste, plus probably literate royal warrior caste, who had like a strict form society. No one can look at the Aztecs and go, "Oh, they weren't a society." The Joker face paint is made of blood.
They were a
Uh,
society.
they were a society. You just
You're
assume.
too late, Guano Man.
I've kidnapped the sacrifices for this morning's sacrifice.
You
No, Joker.
fiends, the harvests won't come.
Listen, you just take a little sacrifice from the temple and not rip out a child's heart on our temple, and everyone just loses their mind.
What will we do? He's going to doom us all to starvation.
Anyway, the point is that we have a society that we can point to and say they did not have the morality of the Greeks and the Romans. They didn't have the philosophy of the Greeks and the Romans. They didn't have the religious teaching of the Jews. They didn't have Odin or Zeus or who gives a shit what else they were worshiping. Their gods are laughing and thirsting. The and see how they turned out. Well, it turns out it's pretty grim. In fact, it's so grim that people cannot, like, it is so evil that people cannot comprehend it. Whereas when you look at Arthur and what they say about King Arthur and all this jazz, oh, it was the pagans that gave him his this or that. Oh, it was the influence of the Paynim, or it was the I can't even, like, you have to understand how weak this argument is. I can't steel man it. The King Arthur comes just from Christianity and is understood as separate from paganism and only separate from paganism.
Yes.
We see what the results of pure paganism is, and it's the Aztecs, and um, it's the Aztecs, and it's the Incas, and it's the 1,000 others who were with them that lived disgusting, brutal lives, that slew just because they had some ideas, and didn't stop when other ideas came forward. Quite frankly, the idea of the sun not rising again only makes sense if you've never been curious about the world. Um, the Egyptians actually, even despite all their like mythology about Ra, going underneath the earth and coming up again, they were a deeply incurious people. They were completely without curiosity, compared to say the Greeks, the Romans, the English. Um, but also they had the assumption that if the pharaoh is at war and he doesn't do the sacrifices, which weren't always human, unlike the Aztecs, they would understand. Ra would be all right for a couple of times. These things happen. He understands. uh but like the Aztecs, they didn't even think that. The sacrifices had to happen. They could have considered the world, because here's the thing: like, killing humans is expensive. Cows are easy to kill. Llamas or whatever they happen to have, I know they didn't have cows, but they could have made different sacrifices. There were other animals running around. They could have sacrificed jaguars, in a more appropriate manner, that sort of thing. Like, there were other options that their religion could have chosen. They chose the most expensive, the most damning option that was available to them. That is sacrificing humans. Like, there's a loss of curiosity about the world around them that just kind of like boggles the mind. The people go on and on about, oh, they burned the Aztec texts. The Aztec texts were not epics like King Arthur. Those were preserved. The Aztec texts that were mostly destroyed, like 80 to 90% of them, or whatever the number is, were almost entirely about human sacrifice. How to skin a man, how to salt his leathery skin so that you may wear it at the high sacrifice positions. These gods are appeased by human sacrifice. This god will eat your sin and shit it out into the earth. I used that god in the Mother Morrow series, goddess, I should say. This is her proper rituals. I hope you have enough, virgins that are 8 years old, so they haven't sinned yet. Whatever the sacrifices are. I could make stuff up. I just did, and you could not tell me what was wrong with the statement. And if I made a mistake, I could immediately say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the Incas. I must have been thinking of the Incas," and you still couldn't correct me with how evil they are.
Yep.
But like, when it comes to King Arthur, if I say a story like, write a story like King Arthur comes across some druids who are looking to sacrifice a man into the bog, one of his knights will say, just actually, no, 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 just a random dude, and he kills the druids and frees the dude. That would actually be in the same way of a story. You could believe that Arthur would fight druids to free a man from being sacrificed in a bog. You could not tell me what is wrong with that story. That it would not be something that King Arthur would do. It's with this sort of thing, like with that one writer you were talking about, Anthony, with Lancelot, or with
Yeah.
the other stories that are excuse me, I'm blanking on it, and the other stories that promote paganism within King Arthur, like the Green Knight, which
Mists of Avalon.
Mists of Avalon. Oh yeah. Like, even the Green Knight can't escape Christianity. The most pagan thing in it, the Green Knight goes, "Oh, is it Christmas? You know, which I don't even think Arioster, if he understood the implication of that, and I know he doesn't, would have included in if he understood that even the pagan things understood Christmas. Um, the the paganization of King Arthur removes the soul of knighthood, not chivalry, not chivalry, not the kingdom in the general sense, in a secular sense, not the not the idea of castles and whatever, you know, the people being oppressed by evil knights. It's the whole concept of knighthood, of the quest. These things come from Christ. You know, you don't have questing in any of the pagan cultures in the same way. You have men who are set on ways to prove themselves, but actually, a knightly quest is not a prove yourself situation. The knight is worthy to take on the quest already, and so must fulfill the quest. It's very clear. Like the you know, I shouldn't say it's very clear, but like even a little bit of thought will reveal that Lancelot, when he reveals a quest, he doesn't actually need to prove himself. He's Lancelot. Tristan is given a quest to save the weakest of Lancelot's cousins or something like that. And he goes, "No. He's got three other cousins who are better than him. They can do it. I'm gonna stay right here and pine after Isolde." And like it's not considered like a negative moral choice of his to make. It's just like, yeah, I guess the other knights should handle it and not the second best knight in the world. You know, like what does he have to prove? Say
Amazing.
saving one of the guys who keeps getting captured all the time. You know, because that was one of the Sir Melian or something like that's job. You know, he was a jobber in the knightly lore. Like he just keeps getting captured, and other people have to save him. Gawain gets some of that treatment as well in the middle story. Um, through Mallory. So it's like the removal of that heart does kill King Arthur as a force. You know, adding incest and all these things is a way to make it, you know, is a way to pile waste on it. You know, and try to destroy it. You can't. You know, the essential soul of King Arthur is less the stories that make it up, even though I could quote many of them, or at least their titles and the various things that happen in them to a point, is in fact its holiness, its search for God, its quest to be godly, is in fact the central theme of Arthur. Um, you know, the honor that comes from you know, doing what you were supposed to do, like questing after the questing beast, is more important even than some of the events in your life. You know, it's like King David and Bathsheba. If these knightly figures sin, truly sin, you know, not just, oh, I don't like what they did there, they're actually called out for it pretty quick. You know, it's something that's lost on our minds. You know, we don't understand it like we used to. When in actuality, you know, this would have been normal thought patterns for the people who are reading this. It's hmm, yeah, I can only say it's just lost on the modern audience, and for those writers who are writing these stories, to them it's a way to pervert, you know, the King Arthur story beyond, um, you know, like take it away from the Christianity, which they hate because it tells them not to stop being a member of Omelas, the you know, the hated place where a child is tormented to bring good luck to a village. You know, they want to stay in there, and things like King Arthur, which is the answer, as I have said many times on this thing, to those who walk away from Omelas, is that you take a sword to the place and free the child. And if you can't free the child, you grant it mercy, because and even then, oh, it's a thousand feet deep, buddy. I've just got a slave labor camp made of the people who benefited from that child's suffering. You're going to dig out the child. Like it's like I can't overstate how much I hate that story because it's just pure self justifying cowardice. It is anti Arthur, anti Quest, anti God. You know, like
Yes.
if you are one of the ones who would walk away from Lomilas, hey, that's more moral than staying there. But it's not knightly. It's not questing. It's not godly in the true sense.
That story also takes on a new and incredibly disturbing undertone when after you read The Last Closet.
Yes.
Uh, all of a sudden, I know exactly what the story is supposed to be, and at first, the great trick of Omelas is that you read it the first time and you go, "Wow, would you stay or would you go?" Very powerful. And then you think for one, go, "Wait a minute, why are we acting like there are only two choices?" It kind of puts a spell on you, and that is a testament to the strength of Le Guin's writing.
Yes.
Le Guin on a pure is in one of those people. She's an evil person. But on a purely technical level, she is incredibly skilled. Credit where it's due.
Yes.
And Omelas has that sort of power. Like, I will admit, like, when I read it the first time, I definitely had that impression because that's the way that Le Guin frames the story, right? But it really doesn't take a lot of thought, right? Like 2 seconds to go, like, wait a minute, why is that the only choice?
Why?
Like, what's going on
They're,
here?
they're
And
tormenting
you're
a
right,
kid in there.
because it's self-justifying cowardice.
Yes.
And very artfully written self-justifying cowardice, but nevertheless, it's self-justifying cowardice meant to
Yes.
make Le Guin feel better about the fact that she didn't help the little girls who were being abused under her nose.
Yep.
And that makes it very disturbing. Now, I will say this. I bet you if we look into, due to this story, I'm willing to bet that if we looked for skeletons in Le Guin's closet, we probably wouldn't find that many because she probably left
Yes.
based on her own lights. However, I also bet that you'll probably hear reports from multiple people that at least at some time she knew something about it.
Oh yes.
But yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Evil story. Yeah, the Arthur myth, like I've written my Arthur novel. It'll be coming out in a good long while. It needs to go through rounds of editing and then get through the publication schedule. But it will be published. Got a publisher. And in my novel, part of the point of it was like, if you, I view Arthur as taking place in what I call Mallory time, right? There is no real time period where Arthur truly makes sense. And the reason that there's no time period where Arthur truly makes sense is, frankly, because we know the kings of England. So it's like he doesn't really slot in anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could say, well, he wasn't king; he was Dux Bellorum or something. But then you're just telling a story I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
I won't say a story not worth telling because I did read a book Beyond the Wall. We actually, I think, had the author on the show, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember if we had him on the show or someone really like connected to him in some way. Whatever.
I can't remember.
Yeah, but he was the author. This guy who was the author of. Yeah, I think we had him on the show because he was talking about making his historical Arthur. I liked him and I liked the book, so I'm not saying it's not worth writing. It just wasn't the story I was interested in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, so there really isn't a place in history where Arthur can truly slot properly. So I always imagine it's taking place in Mallory time. That's like, this is the mythical time of knights and heroes, right? The golden age, that they talk
Yes.
about in all the stories. What's so interesting is that almost every great work is about this time period, right? The Iliad and the Odyssey are about this. They said, like, one of the most striking things about the Iliad and the Odyssey is that Homer clearly imagines the people in the story to belong to an earlier age of heroes. Like, he's very clear about it, that they are just stronger and better and smarter and then,
Yeah.
us, right?
Yeah.
Like, but their time is now past, and we're in the sucky modern age. Yeah.
I hate the modern world.
Yes. Um, Ted Kaczynski, something. I don't know. I feel like there's a Ted Kaczynski joke here, but I can't think of one. Whatever. Look, all I have to say is that the Industrial Revolution and its consequences were a disaster. What? No, I'm done now. Okay. So, point is, right? Like, Arthur needs to take place kind of in its own time. And the time that I always imagine is like Mallory time. This is a time of knights and heroes, the golden age of high Christendom.
Right.
And if you really wanted to ballpark it, it's probably something around the five to 600s. But even then, doesn't really, even that doesn't quite encompass everything Arthur is supposed to be, because you sort of imagine Arthur as being high medieval, plate armor and things like that. So it's kind of, it's an amalgamation. It's a mix. It's Arthur time, right? Arthuriana.
Right.
And I think that properly, I think it would be a mistake to gatekeep Arthur books for that sort of thing.
Right.
Unless, I mean, you can if the book is purporting to be like, oh, this is my historical take on Arthur, right?
Right.
But like the Once and Future King, for example, it would be a huge mistake to critique the book on those grounds. And White himself was very clear that he was not writing the book in that way. And After Camelot is not written in that way. But After Camelot is about a certain thing. And the thing is that if Arthur is that time, if he's the ideal Christian king, running the ideal Christian kingdom before it's taken down by the collective sins of the people at the top, right?
Right.
Ultimately lead to its downfall while Arthur awaits his return at the end times. Then what follows that? Well, just like Homer indicates, what follows that is the coming of the modern world. And no, it's not the modern world in a technological way, but it's the modern world in that, like, it's no longer the ideal Christian king ruling, right?
Right.
It's no longer Christendom around you. You need to figure out how you're going to navigate a world of politics, right? Where people are no longer making their decisions because this is what God wants us to do, right?
Right.
Why are you doing this? Well, I'm doing this because I believe that it's godly. People aren't going to make decisions for that reason anymore. They're not going to help you because they just want to help, right?
Right.
They're not going to come to your rescue because that's what knights do. They are going to do what they do for power and for money and for selfish reasons, right?
Right.
But the last knights of Camelot are still alive. They didn't all die. So how do they navigate this world, right?
Right.
Like, you're from a world where Arthur is king, ruling as a Christian, ruling under Christian morals, whose motivations are entirely godly, and now you need to serve under a man like Constantine. Now, in the original Mallory stories, Constantine is actually not considered to be like a bad king. In fact, he's considered to be quite a good king. I think he was considered to be like, basically the next best thing to Arthur, right? The best possible outcome considering everything that had happened. But nevertheless, just because the transfer over to like the real world didn't happen immediately, the transfer does happen because we get this in Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain. Eventually, you get the historic kings, right, who aren't as good as Arthur was. So in my version of the story, I imagine Constantine as this sort of bridge, right? He's not a bad person, right? In the same way that any modern politician or political leader isn't necessarily a terrible person. They might be, just like there are terrible kings, there are terrible anything, but not necessarily, right? They could be someone who's very well meaning, right? Who even got into it for the right reasons, but they had to make deals, they had to negotiate, they had to make power plays, and they were not ruling with the idealism of the Christian, right? Where I refuse to do this. They will make compromises to accomplish their goals, sometimes even compromises of God and faith, if it means accomplishing their goals. Because that's what it means to be a modern in the modern world, right? That's what it means to live in the world. You are constantly asked questions of what to compromise in your faith. And unless you have somebody at the top who is enforcing a Christian worldview, someone like Arthur, the reality of what will happen if you try and live out your faith and don't compromise is that you become a martyr. And
That's
this is
right.
what we see in the real world with St. Thomas More, right? Refuses to compromise with the King of England, refuses to admit his authority, his spiritual authority over the church, refuses to admit that his marriage was not that his first marriage was invalid, and he gets beheaded for his trouble.
Yep. It's like
And
there's
yeah, go ahead.
and it's like, yeah, but he was defying the king. Yeah, but he chose, like, I know Anthony will disagree on some aspects of this, but the consensus of the time, in the countries that would become Protestant, was that there was a hideous amount of corruption in the church. Priests were not doing their jobs. People were using their cash to, even though I know that the theology is different, but the popular conception was that people were using their cash to buy their way into heaven, or for the more intelligent of them, buy their way out of pure purgatory. But again, the popular conception was, how can we follow Christ if you can just pay and get a get out of jail free card? you know these things there, they were interfering with kings. All the kings of Europe saw how the Pope treated Germany, and had treated Germany for many centuries. These things, and then there was guys like Julian II, who were, shall we say, a little bit threatening, um, being a war pope and all. Uh, this came from there, right? Their desire was to follow Christ better, and they thought they could do it. And I agree that they did do it better for a time, better than the Catholics could, And Sir Thomas More was one of those men who were men of the faith, a great man of the faith. He fought for these Christian things, even if the ideas of Henry were bad, impure, mask off. I might defend Henry in a joking manner, but no, he was doing it because he wanted a son, not because of any great religious perception in his own life. Um, and unfortunately, Sir Thomas More is the one who had to pay for it. These people didn't spring Protestant out of the ground as fully formed as myrmidons. People clearly converted into a mindset. You don't get men like Cromwell from a fake and vapid religious faith, right? The, like what we've been saying about King Arthur, this religious desire in their souls was absolutely real. Lancelot doesn't cry like a beaten child because he it just comes out of the blue. He doesn't know why God's spanking him. No, he knows
Mhm.
entirely what's going on. He knows it down to the theological level, that he has sinned before God, but God is above, who he thinks he is. Um, So it's I'm trying to, like, there's a shift in English writing after the Reformation into things like Shakespeare, into things like Pilgrim's Progress. Allegory becomes huge. There's a pathway that English literature takes, and again, it's often focused on God, on the search for God, that quest for God. Uh, whatever it is in the real politic, the Sir Thomas More's desire to serve God was real, even in his break with the Roman Church.
Right. Like the point of that tangent is that Thomas More is a very clear example to me of, like, you have this sort of realpolitik versus the faith, and you have someone like Sir Thomas More who, let us say, to avoid argument, perceived this as a break, right? This was how
Yeah,
he saw the matter. And he was very clear that this was how he saw the matter. And he could not and would not defy his conscience on this point, right? He was willing to
right.
come close. Hilaire Belloc writes about this. He says that what's so interesting about Sir Thomas More is, in fact, that he is the exact sort of person who you would never expect to make this sort of sacrifice, which is a very interesting comment. What he meant by this, Belloc,
Hmm.
is that More was a lawyer, right?
Right.
He was a lawyer, and he was he was a highly respected and popular man of letters. He was actually the Inquisitor in England, so he was in charge of persecuting Lutherans mostly. Um, anyway, but he was a highly respected man of letters. He was a lawyer who knew the law inside and out, who was who the king knew personally, right, and was friends with. I've seen people dispute this. They said that A Man for All Seasons gets more wrong. I disagree. I actually think A Man for All Seasons gets him quite correctly. I've seen them go, no, when Moore was actually a lot more loud against King Henry than the movie portrays, right? Um, yes and no. He would write letters about it from the tower, but he did not say it publicly, right? He wouldn't say anything publicly.
It's
Um,
almost like he was still a loyal man to where God had put him.
yes. So the point being here that, and Belloc's point where he goes, he's the exact sort of man who you wouldn't expect to do this. They said after Henry announces the break from the church, literally everyone, almost, with the two exceptions, famously, right? Fisher, I believe, the Archbishop, being the other, and Moore, right? Don't sign on to it. Everybody else does.
Right.
And they said Moore, they said, is the exact sort of person who you think would sign on to this. He has every reason to think like that you should, right? Like
Right.
that he, like he's friends with the king. It doesn't really change. Like he's in a very good position in the country. And to be honest, it's not really going to change how he worships day to day, right?
Right.
They said, in fact, all he was disputing was essentially at the time, disputed legal point about the Pope, right?
Mm.
Like a highly disputed legal point about the Pope. They said, but More, they said, what makes More so remarkable is that he nevertheless had a belief, established this belief, and then said, if I really do believe this, and I do, then to go against it would be to betray God. And while I am willing to make any number of compromises, that is the line I can never and will never cross. Right?
Yep.
Like, it is the line of, do I really believe this thing or don't I? Right? And again, you could say, like, is he right or is he wrong? Let us say that Moore came to the ultimate conclusion that he did, in fact, really believe this thing.
Yeah.
Therefore, he could not, in good conscience, claim that he didn't. That would be living a lie. and that would be a betrayal of God to live a lie.
Yes.
And so he died for it. Now, this is I use him as an example not to bring up the Protestant Catholic Wars. It's entirely not the point. It has nothing to do with the discussion. I bring more up as an example of this sort of real politic clashing with true religion, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, there's
because
a difference
the real
between.
politic of More
Yeah.
would have been to sign the document, is what I'm trying to
Yes.
say, right? Like, that would have been the political thing to do.
Yeah.
More could not do it. So
It,
he died.
yes. And it's one of those things where, like, with our, we need to do this again sometime, but like with our Protestant versus Catholic thing, we're not actually
eventually.
fighting. We're not actually fighting over the actions of, say, Julian, or even men like the people who sold indulgences. We're arguing over the actual immortal spiritual issues and interpretations thereof. The acts of men change. Uh, Again, we mentioned the politics of that time. Again, Sir Thomas More could have just been whatever was politic. He wouldn't have been a memorable man because otherwise. But the if he had chosen the politic thing, but no, he chose the moral thing. He chose something greater than the politics. That's also something lost from King Arthur. Which we have mentioned either indirectly or directly in the stream. But let's look at some stuff real quick from the pagans, right? Like, these are the modern pagans,
Yes,
the
I know you
people.
want to talk about this.
I do, and it fits in because it's like, if you have a bunch of druids sacrificing people, you actually have a decent pagan argument. You have sacrifices and rituals. You have priest castes, and you're not just a random dude setting up weird statues in the place, going "Hail the old gods," which is cringe, because they have no power and you've shed no blood in their worship. Uh, and you might see, but they're this. No, all they are haters of Christianity. So let's talk about some things. And I will ask my dear sweet viewers to forgive me, but I will be sharing, talking about the posts of women and spiritual women.
Oh
Uh,
no.
I'm so sorry. Remember the standard. If a woman is talking about anything spiritual and she is unmarried, has no kids, and has signs of, shall we say, an alt lifestyle, you may safely ignore. Uh, Not that you should be taking, that stuff from women anyway. It's not like they're Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc actually led the army from the front. She put her money where her mouth was, so to say. I'm learning as I go, so I have a question. How did paganism get being labeled satanic when Satan is a Christian figure and not part of pagan traditions at all? Pagan literally means the old pre-Christian nature-based belief systems that honored the seasons, the land, the ancestors, and the cycles of life. Everything I can find says that it's older than Christianity. Not true, and never had anything to do with Satan. What is the thing? And the thing is that, like, why why is paganism evil? Well, first off, this woman is then she's got some AI pic of a woman sitting in a forest. Pagans are evil, ugly, horrible people who offend God. Pagans, picture of a blonde woman in a forest. um like, besides the fact that this is incredibly ignorant, and I don't mean it in the sense of like a SJW ignorant, I mean they literally know nothing. They don't know enough to even have a conversation. I have not posted anything on this account at this woman, but it's like, I almost assume this is a troll. The pagans that still milled around, the few that left in King Arthur's time, weren't like this. They didn't consider themselves anything like Satanist, of course, but they understood themselves to be enemies of God, which makes them aligned with Satan. Thank you, Rebecca. Very cool. The next one is, there were some arguments about Saint Boniface chopping down the oak of Odin, or whatever it's called. There were some who were claiming stupidly that he had been killed by a lightning strike. No, he was robbed in the street between towns because the robbers thought he was carrying gold instead of Christian manuscripts. And some legends even say that he prevented his own soldiers from defending him because he thought it would repay evil with for evil, which I don't agree, but I'm not as holy a man as Saint Boniface. Uh, so you have pagans LARPing, lying, saying that Zeus struck a man for cutting down another country's god's tree, which, again, are these people trolling? I don't know. I think about it sometimes. But looking at this one person, Christians have to purposefully ignore the Greeks and Romans in order to make their point about paganism not being important. Should expect nothing less of these people. They're cowards and dunces who reject their own European heritage. This is going to sound wild, but King Arthur is the fulfillment of European heritage, I say back. Not that I posted this because again, arguing with ignorant people makes you a fool. The Bible is very clear about this. First off, Christianity is fundamentally a fulfillment of things that the Greeks were already moving towards of their own accord. If you read Aristotle, he pushes towards ideas of morality and thought that are beyond some sort of like Christian guilt moral complex to the reasons behind morality. The pagans willingly adopted Christianity, not because of some sort of power or elite theory, or I don't even know. They adopted it because it was, even for the winning of it, they adopted it because it was true, because it made sense, because it was better than their dead, unanswering gods. And then, of course, there's all these tales of courage, chivalry, of a mindset that can only be understood in the bounds of courage, comes from Christianity. Then, of course, some quote unquote spiritual women, which I only mean as an insult. You may imagine what type of man would attempt to be a spiritual woman. Never forget, Norse paganism is the only religion MEGA, as in Make Israel Great Again, and the regime fears. Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Kwanzaa can't accommodate them enough. But white guys start identifying with their ethnic gods, and that's a threat to the DEI empire. If you had any power, you would be a threat, but you're not. You're an internet poster who has led many to their spiritual death. How many troops? Oh, it's a fake religious affiliation, because it is a fake religious affiliation, because you don't want to be an atheist, because you know that they're cringe. You don't want to be an agnostic because you know that they're nothing. You don't want to be a Christian because that would mean submitting to Christ and giving up your sin. Oh, so we'll be pagan. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. You can't even get your gods right. Uh, Again, from this man who was a spiritual woman. Christianity protected Europe from Islam. No, it didn't. Letting Africans conquer all the way across Spain to France, and Turks conquer all the way to Vienna, Austria, isn't keeping Muslims out. I seem to recall Vienna being multiple Christian victories, but whatever. No such thing happened under Greece and Rome with less technology. 300 Spartans in a weekend did more than Christianity over 100 years. Now, I don't know what Xanax and Prozac mix this person's on. I don't know what alcohol they're drinking while they're horking down these pills like a pig to slop. But it's like, it's driving me crazy. Like, is this person trolling? No, because it falls in line with all their other quotes. It's like well, what do you mean? The reason why Visigothic Spain fell is because they let the Muslims in, and the Muslims happened to be on the ascendance. Their armies were given their moment of unconquerable fighting spirit, uh, and it didn't get all the way, through Spain. So many of the mountain kingdoms, which also gave Rome problems, by the way, uh, uh, in their different times, pushed back. And then you had, again, thank you, Megabuster Shepherd, Charles Martel. Just because a non-Christian wins a few battles in their time, in their year, doesn't mean that God's hand isn't working. The Visigoths were probably not very good Christians, and I don't mean that in a moralistic way, which I in the sense of like I am so much of a better person, that sort of self moralism. I mean it in the sense of they sought, rather than from other Christian rulers, they sought non Christians to do their dirty work. That's not Christian. That's not Christian behavior. The Spartans lost. Uh, the armies around them were already mobilizing. They just gave them some time. The it's with the Muslims as well. Haven't you seen how cringe the Muslims act online? Haven't you seen their failures to bring in successful people into their lot? Oh, but the Saudis are so rich. They got rich off of oil, and they routinely beat down their religious extremists, the Wahhabis and stuff like that, while also using them as a power base. Haven't you paid attention to the last couple purges they've had over the last couple decades? No, of course not. These things, this worship of Satan, of not yeah, I guess it is worship of Satan, but rather the worship of being against God is completely ridiculous. They have no mindset. They have no soul in them that can handle actual Christian experience. They see a lack of chivalry in Christians, a certain amount of weakness, and they think it's some sort of like sign that the pagans are correct. It's like, yeah, okay, you pick out, five weaker Christians, men of compromised body and compromised morals, and then you're going, oh, don't you know the Christians are all like this? When in actuality, we know they're not. For Charles Martel, thank you again, Megabuster Shepherd. For Charlemagne, for the Hussars, who pushed back the Muslims once again at the gates of Vienna. They ignore Lepanto. They ignore the fact that God gives seasons to people for their success and for their failures. That God sets up people to be destroyed. They ignore the complete and totality of Christianity in its mindset, in how God interacts with these people. They ignore the many yards of manuscript writing about how God set up men like Charlemagne, which was understood by even the most illiterate peasant of their time, that these men were set up by God to serve the people. This paganism and their posturing online like they're so, like they have anything serious behind them other than some, little statues they made of their own hands. The Bible says much about it and how worthless it is. It's nothing but the laughter of demons who know a man's going to hell. It's completely off the rocker that men should take this seriously. Um, it destroys credulity in their movements and ideas that they're pushing forward. Oh, but Christianity has failed. Yeah. This is going to sound weird, but the state of man being sin is not new. It has never been new. Many of the people who built cathedrals also went to hell because of who knows what beliefs, not because of some sort of, oh, well, they didn't believe hard enough, but because they had a misplaced position in their beliefs. How many Christian rulers of Europe went to hell? How many Habsburgs, how many popes, to bring it back to something we talked about at the beginning of the stream, went to hell? How many Protestant pastors went to hell? The failure, quote unquote, of Christianity is not some sort of new and weak thing that has never existed beforehand, but rather it is simply a reflection of our fallen world, and why God the Father sent his son Jesus Christ down to earth to die for our sin so that we would not have to be in our old man's sin forever. Pagans frustrate me in ways that Muslims do not. I see a Muslim and I see a dog choking on a bone. They don't dare spit it out because they're dogs and they can't think through it. Uh, I think there's a reason why God appears, Jesus appears, and even Mary, if some of the reports are to be believed, appears to them so often. It's because they don't understand better and can't think it through the same way. Uh, I'm shocked India hasn't had more of a Christian revival on just the misery of their nation. I understand why China doesn't. China's relatively good on suppressing dissent, but that's not even something new. It's what they've done all their existence. Uh, these things that people bring up again and again and again, it doesn't mean a thing. It is noise, the barking of dogs. Just like when you see a video of Muslims performatively prostrating themselves before something they view haram. This is unknown to people, but they don't actually do it every day. They take the video and then they leave and they never come back again. And I know that because of how they interact in St. Louis, where I live, where they do basically the same thing. There's no power outside of Christ. And if we can throw off the yoke of forgoing power and all these other things that come about as a part of our gentle nature as Christians, but not but now they've become disordered when it comes time to act. It, it's difficult. It's frustrating. It's you know it's like seeing it's like reading the King Arthur stories, but not having any concept of the heroism of the fight. Um, looking at some of these quotes under the one about the 300 Spartans did more. Uh, let me see here. Some of the things like dumbest tweet of all time. Uh, you know, there was another one that ticked me off. Um, hopefully, I'll see it. But it's like, oh, the Vikings showed up and did a surprise attack on Lindisfarne, and that just shows the weakness of Christianity. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? It
Getting a little
it's
worked up there, Ben.
I'm getting worked up. Is better than feeling nothing about it. But it's like with also Fall of Constantinople. Thank you, academic agent. Uh, Byzantium was falling for 500 years, but it's Christianity is what made it survive 1,000 years after its fall, or 900 and change, whatever. Uh, the it's part of the spirit, it's part of the grand total of what people are missing from King Arthur when they're writing these new things, these pagan interpretations, when their takes are so ludicrously bad that non-Christians spaz out, and people go like, yes, King Xerxes, the first Muslim, you know. All these things. Oh boy, I hope I don't see any retarded posts today. Well, shit. Et cetera, et cetera. If you can't understand the faith that brought Christianity forward, shout out to my homies in the Varangian Guard, best boys, Varangian Guard. If you can't understand Christianity and its place within man's soul and within Europe, you won't be able to understand King Arthur or Charlemagne or Charles Martel or any of the other ones. You just won't understand it. You won't understand how power flows and ebbs in the rise of nations beyond some sort of academic and I don't mean academic agent, but he's part of the problem with that sort of thing. But economic issues. Oh, it was the economy that caused Rome to fall. No, the thing that caused Rome to fall is that those in power didn't actually, if they said they were Christian, didn't actually believe in Christ enough to keep monetary policy from being corrupt. They didn't believe in it enough to not reach for the golden crown of Rome. Why do you think the nature of rebellions change after Rome falls and the medieval system comes up? Yeah, there's rebellions all the time, but it doesn't cause nearly the damage as the average Roman civil war, post-Christian, anti-Christian, whatever. There's a different mindset. History evolves with the times, and not as history, doesn't, repeat, it rhymes. I mean, in the sense of the nature of people changed between the non-Christians and the Christians, and then when it became non-Christian again, which is a time we're living in, what are you shocked that all these things are going so poorly? Trump may be a Christian. I don't think so, quite frankly. There's something off, or at the very least, he's listening to non-Christians in his cabinet, and he's never been a man I don't mean in the sense of never been a man, but he's never been a man to have hyper-strong political opinions of his own. What are we to do with that? He's the yeah, and there's another one. Mega Buster Shepherd points out Rome died because they kept raffle stomping every Roman senator, general, and emperor who tried to save it. Yeah, pagan or not. And many of these men who tried to save it were Christians. In fact, it was the men who were more like pagans who often killed them. Majorian is the biggest name there, but also men like he was the one that was half German. There was the one who defeated Attila. I'm worked up, so my brain's not quite working right. I haven't had much to eat today. But the loss of these Christian men, or at least men who claimed to be Christian, hurt the Roman Empire every time. But you lose a couple of dukes and counts in a French-English war, and both countries run on without issue. What nonsense? Like, what do you mean? There's clearly something different. The basis of your statements, these pro-pagan statements, is entirely against God and against Christ. It's just like Evola wanting a high priest king, golden age, free candy for every non-untouchable, whatever type is, and yet he goes to Christ and goes, Jew. Like ridiculous nonsense. In reality, it's an inability to think properly, to think of truth. The people who wrote the famous Arthur stories did not have this problem. Even the horny French ones kept God in its proper place and kept the romance in its proper place as being bad. Even the ones invented for Lancelot are more about the illicit romance, like it's Barnes and Noble romance novel than it is, actual chivalry, and why so many authors corrected it in the next editions. I have nothing but disdain for pagans, not because of some sort of, oh, you're so much better than them, sort of mindset, but because of their willingness to hork down lies like a Japanese hot dog eating contestant. And then, of course, they throw them up after, like most Japanese hot dog eating contestants. That's uh that's my rant. This stuff makes me angry because it's so full of lies. It's so untrue. It's a pursuit of untruth that poisons a well that you don't know you had until you see it. Um, whatever troubles we're going through as a society, fundamentally, it's been repeated again and again and again and again. You look at Rome and Sparta and all these other things. There was a corruption of the soul of the people, of the soul of the leadership and the king and the emperor or the two kings or whatever, so that they no longer sought the good that made up their society. Agesilaus was a great man of history, but at the same time, he never should have been king if the Spartans were truly keeping to their laws, because he was a cripple. Sure, he was a brilliant man, but he mocked Lysander for all the good he did for the Greeks. By making him a servant in some cases, like you look at these things, and that comes from a crippled mindset, by the way. Uh, a hatred of the whole and the good. Even if he was more on the loving side of it, it came out in a bout of such mockery. And maybe that didn't change history over much, but it may have changed, important things that, he didn't have Lysander with him for the next ones. It's it's hard to comprehend this if you're a pagan, to have this morality. Well, he was right to do so because Lysander was a rival. But a Christian would say, whether or not he is a rival, he has to have a state of honor. Even most of the pagans understood that. You read some of the writing of like the Eastern strategy guys, and they're like, yeah, don't piss off people stupidly. You know, whatever adventures Agesilaus got up to, even to the end of his days, it's not something that should have been given the same pride of place if the Spartans were keeping their laws. The loss of those laws in the end made them more of a laughing stock, made them submit to Alexander, made them, made them not Sparta, not the Spartans of old. Um, you want to go back to that? They didn't even keep their own laws. They didn't even worship their own gods. The these people who worship Odin again or go into the forests, they don't sacrifice in the way that Odin wished to be sacrificed, with strangled men and dead bodies strung up to remember his hanging on the tree for greater wisdom and other things of that nature. Um, let's see it happen. You won't do it, though, even though it's part of the whole sequence, this death of human sacrifice, this destruction of what you own in an attempt to be something greater, something that is alien to Arthur, who says that man should be saved by the stronger men, who says that you should quest in the name of Christ and devote yourself to him so that you may live fully without fear of death. It's lost. They don't know it. They're lost. They don't understand. That's my paganism rant. It's important. All right, it is so important for us Christians to not give them an inch, to not let them lie. When they go hail the gods, you can ignore that pablum noise, barking of dogs. but it's when they try to be serious, when they try to be serious things, they have lost so much, and their oracles are so silent, and their sacrifice is so weak that they're nothing, and they will never be relevant. But the Christian who goes out to quest, to fight these battles, to give honorable accounts of themselves, not to prove themselves, even though they're already proven in Christ, but to show their worshipful attitude. That is the ideal for the Christian.
Yeah, I mean, this just occurs to me as C.S. Lewis. You know you probably know it. The cliche came out of its cage.
No,
I'm surprised. I recommend it.
I
Easy to
probably
look up.
know it. I just cliche came out of his.
So your whole argument, and it's going to be the end because I'm tired, man. I'm tired. But
Keep live streaming.
Ben, please. No. You said it starts off like this. You said the world is going back to paganism. Oh, bright vision. I saw our dynasty in the bar of the house spill from their tumblers a libation to the Arignes, and leave us with Lord Russell wreathed in flowers, heralded with flutes, leading white bulls to the cathedral of the solemn muses, to pay where due the glory of their latest theorem. Hestra's fire in every flat rekindled burned before the larder gods. Unmarried daughters with obedient hands tended it by the hearth. The white-armed venerable mother, domum servant lanam facibat, at the hour of sacrifice their brothers came, silent, corrected, grave before their elders. On their downy cheeks easily the blush arose, is the mark of freemen's children, as they trooped gleaming with oil, demurely home from the palestra or the dance. Walk carefully. Do not wake the envy of the happy gods. Shun hubris. The middle of the road, the middle sort of men are best. Eidos surpasses gold. Reverence for the aged is wholesome as seasonable rain. And for a man to die defending the city in battle is a harmonious thing. Thus, with magistral hand, the Puritan soon cooled and schooled and tempered our uneasy motions. Heathendom came again, the circumspection and the holy fears. You said it. Did you mean it? Oh, inordinate liar, stop. Now, that's actually quite funny. The joke there is somebody casually said to Lewis, paganism is returning. And then Lewis said, you mean it? So the virgins will tend the hestral flames and will restart the sacrifices. Uh, and he's right. Like these online pagans that we see are not serious people. And just to check on that, you can simply ask them, how many bulls have they sacrificed to Zeus this morning? Surely they at least give him the best part of their meals before at dinner, right? Otherwise, I don't understand what they even think. Why would Zeus ever listen to them anyway?
But I gave them a little wine in a cup before a plastic statue I bought from
An
a.
insult. An
Yes,
insult to Zeus.
insult.
The great Zeus has temples built to him. He has he has cattle slaughtered to him,
And
and
yet you. Sorry, keep going.
you dare to placate him with a little wine in a plastic cup that you got from Walmart.
Cheap wine, and only in a corner of your goon cave.
Yes.
I love the ending of this poem. He repeats the first style again. And then for the last few lines, he says, are these the pagans you spoke of? Know your betters and crouch dogs. You that have Vichy water in your veins and worship the event, your goddess history, whom your fathers called the strumpet fortune.
Yes, it's an incredible ending, and he's exactly right. That's the point. Like somebody, he's addressing the person who says, "Oh, the pagans are recurring," and then he goes, "Please, you wish. Know your betters and crouch, dogs." right? Like, you
Yes.
claim to be pagan, the pagans would have eaten you alive.
Yes.
Yeah, you wish you could be as great as the pagans, and the pagans were nowhere near as great as the Christians.
It's true.
And that is where we shall end it. Great
We
poem.
shall. It is a great poem. We'll have a guest on next week, Lord willing. We'll be a little delayed because I have a church meeting I have to attend. Only good things. But the
Yay.
excuse me. But the ideas we have here, you might be like, yeah, you spent like 3/4 of this talking about pagans. No. The essential King Arthur is Christian, and it can
Yes.
be nothing else. So, crouch, dogs. You have that Vichy water in your veins. I will say, no matter how those esoteric Hitlerists prate, none of them praise Vichy France. All right. Thank you guys. And we'll be